Morant with a running start. Elevates. Oh, he dunks. Oh, my goodness.
Tie game in overtime. Gasol will turn. His heave is good. Memphis on top. 7-10 remaining.
Conley now with three. Count it. A 15-point lead for Memphis. And Blake Griffin gets into it on the floor with Randolph. Hard to tell if there are any punches being thrown under there, but Griffin took acceptance.
Adams going long. Morant. He hit it. John Morant, insanity.
You gotta be kidding me.
Welcome to Grits and Grinds, a Memphis Grizzlies podcast. Grizzlies win edition. My name is Keith Parrish. If you saw the game on Saturday, you saw the David Roddy game. David the Body Roddy, as I like to say it. Roddy the Body, Rowdy Roddy Sniper, had a career night and a massive fourth quarter. The Grizzlies found themselves down 11 to a Dallas Mavericks team that did not have Luka Doncic, that did not have Kyrie Irving. As we've spelled out the stats on this show many, many times, the Grizzlies have some terrible fourth quarter numbers this year. They might be the worst fourth quarter team in the NBA. They've had multiple blown double-digit second half leads recently, and they found themselves down 11 with 11 minutes to go. But the hero came, and it was David Roddy. David Roddy's career high before Saturday was 15. He scored 17 in the final 11 minutes as the Grizzlies erased that deficit and got a very big win. They won their 7th straight home game. They moved to 10-0 on Friday and Saturday night home games. 10-0 on the weekend, Friday and Saturday night in Memphis this season. The Grizzlies still have the second best home record in the NBA. 28-5. They are 4 games away from tying the franchise record for the most home wins in a season that was set in the 2012-2013 season. But all of those streaks and all of those numbers almost came to an end because they were getting beaten by Jaden Hardy and Josh Green and Tim Hardaway Jr. It was a flat, ugly game. I mean, they got up early. They got up in the first half. They're playing a team that doesn't really even have a point guard, is lacking a primary ball handler. They were playing fine. They got up by like 9 in the first half. They were up by 6 at halftime. They were favored in this game by 8. It felt a little bit like they were playing with their food, but in the third quarter, things start to dry up. They had some success in the paint in the first half. They don't score basically any points in the paint in the third quarter. The Mavericks do a good job of keeping everything on the perimeter. The shots aren't going in. Through 3 quarters, the Grizzlies have made 6 3-pointers. The Mavericks have made 12 3-pointers. Through 3 quarters, the Grizzlies have committed 11 turnovers. They had 10 basically halfway through the third. They took care of the basketball pretty well from that point forward. They ended up with no turnovers in the fourth quarter, the big fourth quarter. Like, they were on their way to a loss that would have been crushing because the Mavericks still have hopes of rising in the standings. And as Grizzlies fans, we're pretty terrified about how this team is going to hold up. Like, can we hold on to home court advantage in the playoffs? Is there any remote chance we could fall all the way down into the play-in? The odds were remote, but if the Mavs won that game, we start thinking about it. If the Mavs win that game, the Mavs get close to the 6th spot in the standings. The Mavs move to a 2-0 record against the Grizzlies this year. Luckily, they don't. It's a 1-1 split. But you start thinking about, what if the Mavs have a tiebreaker over the Grizzlies? What if the Grizzlies really spiral and play very poorly because of their schedule coming up? Because they're going to be on the road. And as we know, the Grizzlies are bad on the road this year. So to drop a game to the Mavericks without Kyrie or Luka, it would have been crushing, especially heading out onto this 3-game road trip they're on. And again, you needed a hero. Jaren Jackson Jr. through 3 quarters was 1 for 9 from the field. Dylan Brooks was having his normal ragged offensive game. You needed a lift, and it came from David Roddy. David Roddy got an and one after the timeout where the Grizzlies went down 11. David Roddy bullied himself into position for a nice inbounds play where he got a layup. David Roddy hit a couple of open threes. And by the way, the Mavericks, whoopsie daisy, were not guarding David Roddy, daring him to shoot. We've seen teams dare Roddy to shoot in previous games. This time, Roddy was on fire. Roddy gets the steal at midcourt as part of this run. He cuts a Mavs lead in half. He ends up for the game. He ends up making a career-high 4 3-pointers. I mean, the 17-point fourth quarter, absolutely huge. It's the highest scoring fourth quarter for a rookie in Grizzlies franchise history since Ja Morant scored 17 against the Nets in his 3rd career game. By the way, the most points in a fourth quarter for a rookie in Grizzlies franchise history, Dylan Brooks had 20 in that famous game against the Bulls back in Dylan's rookie year. But Roddy stepped up and was huge. He gets a second chance bucket in clutch time. The Grizzlies have not been a good clutch team this year. The Grizzlies have actually played the 3rd fewest clutch games this season. In their last 9 clutch situations, we're talking about the score is within 5 with 5 minutes left in the game. They're just 3-6 in their last 9 clutch opportunities. That's including this win. They're 24th this year in point differential in clutch situations. Their main guys have been bad. Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, and Jaren Jackson Jr. are all making under a third of their shots in games. If you make it the score within 3, if the score is within 3 in the final 5 minutes of games, Jaren, Desmond, and Ja are all shooting under 33% individually. But David Roddy puts the team on his back, essentially. Brevin Knight with a scintillating call after he scored his first 8.
Roddy, 4-3. Who's going to come with him, partner? He needs somebody to come with him.
He eventually got a little bit of help. Jaren made some big plays in the fourth quarter. Jaren had half of his 14 points in the fourth quarter. Desmond Bane made a massive clutch time 3. That 3-pointer from Desmond Bane, corner 3, put the Grizzlies up 4. That was the first 3-pointer Desmond Bane has hit all season if the score is within 3 in the final 5 minutes of the game. First one he's made all year. I mean, Desmond Bane was huge the whole game. The fun story is David Roddy. We're excited about David Roddy. We don't mean to take away Desmond Bane's shine. Desmond Bane had 25 points, had 8 assists, and 7 rebounds. Bane was huge, but they needed more, and they got it from David Roddy. David Roddy posts the first 20-point game for any wing player off the bench this season. The only players who've scored 20 points off the bench this year for the Grizzlies, Tyus Jones did it 1 time, Brandon Clark did it twice. This is the first 20-point performance off the bench of the entire year for any of the wings on the team. This is the first 20-point performance, obviously, for any of the rookies this year. You want to throw Zaire Williams in with that. This is the first 20-point performance between Roddy, LaRavia, Kennedy Chandler, Zaire Williams. Santi Aldama has 1 20-point game. He did it as a starter. Just 2 total 20-point games from all those guys. Aldama, Roddy, LaRavia, Zaire Williams. Maybe it'll be the start of something big, something huge. The Grizzlies only played a 9-man rotation in this one. In the previous game against the Warriors, they played 10-man rotation in the first half, shortened it to an 8-man rotation in the second half. They didn't go to 8 in this one. They played 9. After the game, Taylor Jenkins said they're probably going to stick with a 9-man rotation for a while. So this is our team. Tyus Jones, Desmond Bane, Dillon Brooks, Jaren Jackson Jr., Xavier Tillman starters. Bench, Luke Kennard, David Roddy, John Conchar, Santi Aldama bench. So that's your 9. That's who we got now. But maybe this will be Roddy's seizing of the opportunity where he becomes just a more regular player. Like, he's been playing solidly for a while now, it feels like. In his last 20 that he's played in, he's made 37.5% of his three-pointers. He's made 53% overall from the field. Obviously not high volume, but he has been a fairly consistent performer. So maybe he can turn this big performance into being a more consistent presence for a bench that needs it. Like, the Grizzlies have gotten very little from their bench all season. Luke Kennard in this one hits a couple of threes. He finishes with 8 points, gets 2 steals. You combine that with Santi Aldama. Santi Aldama scored 10 points. And, like, in previous games, we'd be like, hey, Aldama scored 10 and Kennard scored 8. Oh, it's pretty good for us. It's not good for most teams. That's pretty good bench performance. But then you throw in Roddy dropping 24 on top of that, and you're saying, yes, finally. That's how the Grizzlies can pull out a win when Jaren is not at his elite offensive performance. When Dillon has a mediocre to bad offensive game, making 3 out of 9 field goal attempts, 1 for 6 for 3 for Dillon. By the way, in the pregame or at the shoot-around, Dillon just filling up the airwaves with quotes, talking about how much he's not surprised Luka Doncic isn't going to play in the game because not everybody wants to play in a very physical game. Saying he hopes Kyrie can go because he wants to see what Kyrie's got. He didn't feel like he had a good chance to take him on one-on-one last time. Dillon's just talking. I mean, Dillon's always talked, but now it seems like the national media is putting the microphone in his face, and he is not letting them down. The wild Dillon quotes are flying. If you didn't hear the episode I did with Chris Harrington on Friday, there's some more very funny Dillon quotes that haven't really gotten out yet that are said in that. So definitely check that out. But David Roddy ends up a huge hero for the Grizzlies. He is just the 6th rookie in Grizzlies franchise history to score 24 or more in a game off the bench. This is a fun collection of players. You have Brandon Clark, who did it 3 times. Javon Carter, who scored 32 off the bench. I believe the last game of whatever that season was, the last time he was on the team, 2019, I guess. And then Jaren Jackson Jr. did it. Juan Carlos Navarro did it. And then we're going all the way back to year 1 in Memphis, Gordon Giricek. This win for the Grizzlies, this rally, it was just their 5th rally from a double-digit deficit of the season. It was just their 5th win of the season when they trailed after 3 quarters. This win where you rally in the 4th quarter, also notable because the last 2 games, the win over the Warriors, the win over the Mavericks, the Grizzlies have dominated their 4th quarters. Maybe the pendulum is swinging back from it's been terrible in 4th quarters all season. Now it's just leveling off. The regression to the mean. The aggression to the mean, as I like to say. I know that's not a real thing. But against the Warriors in the 4th quarter, you outscored the Warriors 32-17. In the Mavericks, you outscored the Mavericks 35-25. That is a total of 67-42 in the last 2 4th quarters combined in games that mattered. games where the outcome was not determined for a lot of the fourth quarter. Yeah, you were ahead against the Warriors, but I wasn't comfortable at all in that Warriors game. I'm fearful that Steph and Clay are going to go off. But they eventually pulled away in that one, and then in this one they rally and they get one of those rare clutch victories for this team. Tyus Jones was a steadying force in this one, like he is. 10 assists and no turnovers. Racked up another double-double. 11 points, 10 assists, 0 turnovers for Tyus. Xavier Tillman has become a very consistent presence in the paint. 12 points and 8 rebounds for him. Got 2 assists, a steal, and a block. All right, now let's take a quick break for a word from the sponsor, and I'll be back to wrap the show up. All Grizz all the time. Stay connected and follow at memphisgrizzlies and at Grind City Media across all social channels, including Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram for breaking news, one-of-a-kind content, and all the perspectives you won't find anywhere else. All right, I talked earlier about how important this game was. Like, you didn't want to give the Mavericks any form of momentum to slide up into the standings. You did not want to risk losing home court advantage in the first round of the playoffs. I think that's very much on the table. The Suns lost to the Kings on Saturday night, which is good for the Grizzlies, not chasing the 2 seed, of course, because the Kings, we want them to lose. But honestly, I'm okay with them beating the Suns if that keeps the Suns behind the Grizzlies. The Suns are 3.5 games behind the Grizzlies as of the games played through Saturday night. And the Grizzlies, since they split the season series with the Suns, the Grizzlies will have the tiebreaker over the Suns by virtue of the Grizzlies winning the Southwest Division. The division winner is going to be the tiebreaker if, in fact, the Grizzlies and Suns end up tied. Of course, unless the Grizzlies lose out and the Mavericks catch them or something. But again, that's not going to happen. The Grizzlies are going to win the division almost assuredly. If they do, that will be the tiebreaker between the Grizzlies and Suns. So that 3.5 game lead, it's essentially a 4.5 game lead. So that's a very good sign for the Grizzlies hanging on to the 3 seed. And with the Grizzlies having 17 games left, them being 7 games up on the teams in the play-in, that becomes, again, very, very unlikely that the Grizzlies could slide that far back. You'd also have to have a team go on a huge run in addition to the Grizzlies losing a bunch for that slide to occur. But, of course, that didn't change the fact that this game was super important, and you can see it was super important based on the fact that Jaren Jackson Jr. played the final 15 minutes of the game. Desmond Bane played the final 15 minutes of the game, or 14 minutes of the game. I mean, David Roddy also played the final 13 minutes of the game. They didn't sub out. Those guys, they couldn't afford to not have them on the court. It is notable with as well as Roddy was playing. I mean, I guess we just pointed out that meant that they didn't go back to Xavier Tillman. Xavier Tillman, like I said, was on his way to a pretty solid, it would have been an even bigger stat line if he'd played in the fourth quarter. The Mavericks could not match up with his size. But since Roddy was playing so well, they rolled with Jaren as the only big to close the game for the final 6 minutes or so of the game. You had, I guess, Roddy as the 4. Maybe Dillon Brooks was the 4, but the Grizzlies closed with Tyus Jones, Desmond Bane, Dillon Brooks, Jaren Jackson Jr., and David Roddy. Maybe we'll see a little bit more of that. Maybe we'll see more of that on Monday. The Grizzlies have a rematch against the Mavericks. By the way, Luka is out for the rematch on Monday night in Dallas. Kyrie is questionable. That's an early game at 6:30 p.m. By the way, I will be doing a playback over in my playback room, playback.tv/fastbreakbreakfast. I'll be doing it for the second half. The game will be on in that room in the first half if you want to come watch it there, but I will be providing commentary for the second half. So join me at playback.tv/fastbreakbreakfast. So you have the game on Monday at the Mavericks. That's a playback On Wednesday, there's a watch party in Nashville. So come on to that at Noble's Beer Hall. That's a game against the Heat. And then you play at the Spurs. So a couple of challenging games. Definitely, winning 2 in a row against the Mavericks is always hard to win the second game against the same opponent when you play consecutively. And of course, the Grizzlies have been a bad road team. So there's a stat about being a bad road team, which I discovered in the past couple of days. I was on a podcast on Friday, the Athletic NBA show's Slam and Jam podcast. It's a fantastic podcast. If you want extra Grizzlies content, definitely go listen to me on that. But they had a couple of stats. One of them was about road records for teams that fancy themselves to be contenders. And the stat was, in the past 20 years, only 3 teams that won 16 or fewer road games made it out of the first round, and none of those teams made it to the conference finals. The Grizzlies only have 12 road wins, so they'd have to go 4-4 in their final 8 road games to even get to 16 road wins, to even become one of those teams that, seems unlikely to advance past the first round. So, stats are not predictive. Past performance does not guarantee future results, but I thought that was an interesting stat that they uncovered. Another interesting stat they uncovered was that the Grizzlies are one of 3 teams this season to play 5 rookies. They're the only team to do so that has a winning record. The other 2 teams that have played 5 rookies this year, the Rockets and Spurs. So I guess you can draw whatever conclusions you want from that. Good job, by the way, once again, David Roddy breaking the seal of 20-point games for the rookies. Hopefully there will be more before the season ends. A final stat for the Grizzlies in the second half. They outscored the Mavericks 12-0 on second chance points. So that was great to see. Also, here's a fun stat. It's not that fun, I guess. Dillon Brooks continues to struggle offensively, continues to provide hilarious quotes, continues to brick 3-pointers. He is at 31% on threes for the season. The only players in the league who have attempted at least 300 3-pointers, like Dillon has, and have a worse 3-point percentage, it is LeBron James and Jabari Smith. So, just fun stat, I guess. It could always be worse. He could be shooting threes like LeBron James or Jabari Smith. Also, other players who haven't yet attempted 300 threes, who have a worse 3-point percentage than Dillon, David Roddy. David Roddy has a worse 3-point percentage than Dillon Brooks this year, as does one of my favorite players, Chris Middleton. But those are much smaller attempts. Anyways, the Grizzlies with a big win to help hold on to their playoff seeding, to further entrench themselves as having home court advantage. That, of course, means the Grizzlies are going to play a home playoff game. If everything goes right, the first weekend of the playoffs, April 15th and 16th. So go ahead and clear your calendar so you're in Memphis around then to watch the Grizzlies play at home in the playoffs. And, of course, we're undefeated on Friday and Saturday night. So hopefully, I guess the Saturday night game is what we're shooting for. We'll see. Anyways, thanks for listening to this episode. Thanks for listening to Grits and Grinds episodes all season. Thanks to everybody who subscribed to the YouTube channel. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Give me a 5-star rating also in whatever podcast app you are using. Hope you have a great Monday. Talk to you soon. Go Grizz.